of the Art of Giving series that we'll be conducting throughout the month of Ramadan. We're excited for this. We have an amazing guest today, Sheikhana Dr. Tamara Gray, who's going to be kind of leading us off. And I'm just going to begin with praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين حبيبنا نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
Okay, so Brother Musa, I think that your connection is choppy, so I'm just going to jump in here if you don't mind. So Brother Musa here is with ICNA Relief, and he is based in Seattle. My name is Shannon. I am the core team lead of the Minnesota Embrace chapter. Embrace is a convert care organization with the mission to empower, integrate, and serve our Muslim convert community by providing social and educational spaces which encourage growth, shape their Islamic identity, and equip them with the knowledge they need for a lifetime journey. So today, with this theme of the art of giving, we're starting with the self. And we'll see throughout the weeks that we're kind of radiating from ourselves. And next week will be the family, and then our neighbors, and then the ummah at large. So today, alhamdulillah, we're thrilled to have Dr. Tamara Gray with us. So Dr. Tamara Gray is the founder of Rabita, an organization dedicated to promoting positive cultural change through creative educational experiences. She holds a doctorate in leadership from the University of St. Thomas, a master's degree in curriculum theory and instruction from Temple University, and she spent 20 years studying traditional and classical Islamic sciences, Quran, and Arabic in Damascus, Syria. Dr. Tamara Gray worked in the field of education for 25 years before moving into the nonprofit world. She is now the executive director of Rabita and its chief spirituality officer. Her work includes the daily nitty-gritty of project design, as well as support and mentorship of hundreds of women around the world. She is the instructor for more than 10 subjects at Rabita, also teaches at TISA. She teaches Rabiteens and contributes to curriculum development with those projects. Do we have her here? I know she's online. Can we bring her spotlight? There we. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam, rahmatullah.
Is there anything else that you would like to say about yourself before we get started? Did I miss something?
I giggle when you say chief spirituality officer because literally, I just love that. I saw that. I wish I could say I made it up, but I didn't.
Oh.
I saw it on Instagram one day, and I was like, this guy in a regular corporation called himself the chief spirituality officer. So I was like, I get to be a chief spirituality officer. So it's
I thought you did make it up.
No, I didn't. I wish I did.
Oh. Well, as a homemaker, I call myself director of domestic affairs.
Well, see? Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Ante, what would you say? Well, let me take one step here. A lot of times we're kind of packaged with the idea of Ramadan is like the best or the ultimate self-development tool. You know, almost like, who's that guy? Tony Robbins or something, you know, the guy with like the big smile. Like he's about to package that in a 30-day to the best you book or something.
Yeah.
But, you know, like I like to have you here to kind of take that step back and like, what is the proper scope of the self in Ramadan?
Yeah, that's such a cool. First of all, that question is so cool. Just even the phraseology of it. What's the proper scope of the self? I love it. So I really think that Ramadan is. I agree with the Tony Robbins thing to a certain extent, in that it is a free tool. In that it comes to us for free. I'm reading a book right now by Sheikh Bashir Albani, a scholar of the last century, and he says in there that Ramadan is the most valuable tool for the greatest effect at the cheapest cost. And so, in that way of thinking, this idea that Ramadan comes to us for free. It doesn't always feel like free because we have to fast and we're praying and our schedule gets messed up and all of this stuff. But his point in that book is that as we approach Ramadan, just entering into it, just coming into it, we are soaking in the benefits of Ramadan. And I think that's where I would start, because when we enter Ramadan as though it is a self-development tool, outside of connecting it to its spiritual origins, I think we can crash and burn. And so I think the scope of the self in Ramadan is to know the self, number one, to really look at the self and say, where am I? Where am I in my spiritual journey? What do I know right now about Ramadan? What is my health and my schedule and my season of life? Very important one there, season of life. Give me as opportunities in Ramadan. And then how can I put effort, real effort into those things? So not crash and burn, real effort, but recognizing where we are in life so that we can see where we are in Ramadan. I think, I mean, even the Prophet ﷺ, we see him coming to Ramadan, or maybe I should say it differently, interacting with Ramadan differently over the years. His last year, when Angel Jibreel came to him twice with the Quran, was different than earlier years. There are many reasons that the scholars talk about, but if we just think about it here in this idea of the scope of the self, there was a very important piece of the self there, which was the Prophet ﷺ, was his last Ramadan. And so it was critical that he does the Quran twice with Angel Jibreel. So what is critical for us, every Ramadan is going to change depending on our spiritual growth, depending on our life season. And so I suggest to approach it with knowledge of the self. Actually, knowledge of the self makes it work.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, when you've been Muslim for decades, and for those who are born Muslim, you see that you have like your little kid Ramadan where you're like, I get candy and I'm doing this, and you're a teenager and young adult where you can do all the things. And then you start having kids and you can't do all the things, and that just kind of ebbs and flows. And I was talking to somebody earlier today and I said, some Ramadans are boot camp Ramadans and some are like spiritual retreat Ramadans.
Yeah.
And so we just have to kind of assess, which one is this? Is there a lot of outside forces that are dictating how this looks?
I'm interested in that, what you just said. You said that because in a way you juxtaposition them, and maybe that's not what you meant to do. But what is the difference between a boot camp Ramadan and a spiritual retreat Ramadan? How do those
So
look different?
I guess the way I was thinking of it is boot camp Ramadan, you're going to get stronger whether you like it or not.
Gotcha.
Spiritual
Yes.
retreat Ramadan is like that breath of fresh air when
Yes.
you're coming into this like battered and broken in a way, and that could be spiritually, that could be 100 different ways. But the sister I was talking to, she had all the, family that's like, because Easter's in Ramadan this year. So she
Oh,
has family that's coming to her and, pushing things. And she has family that have moved into her house and they're pushing against Ramadan inside her house.
oh,
And,
yeah.
so for her to hold on to her Islam this year, she's having to use a lot of strength to do that. So it felt like that's her boot camp Ramadan.
Oh yeah, I totally understand now, because I totally hear that. And there is great reward there, but it's not going to feel like candles and it's that spiritual feeling. I get it. Yes,
Yep.
100%. Yes.
And I forgot to mention earlier, for those who are watching, we will have a Q&A session at the second half of this, so about 30 minutes in. So if you put your questions in there, we do have people who are collecting those and we can get those questions answered, inshallah. So kind of with this idea of nurturing ourselves, how do we give to ourselves in Ramadan without losing sight of that ultimate purpose? Of that, it's like we were saying, it's not just I'm going to be better for me. I'm improving myself for this connection. Like, how do we keep those two pieces together?
SubhanAllah, when I first became a Muslim, it was a very long time ago, 1985. And before I became Muslim, I was interested in Buddhism. And I was interested in it because it had an element of tazkiyah. I mean, an element of working on the self. But I remember I went to the college Buddhist group, I don't know what, and listening to them talk, it was this self-care, self-betterment, all the stuff just for the self. There wasn't for God. So I really see Islam as standing very strongly in the place of tazkiyah for Allah, like this thing where there is our intention, our works are by our intention. So one person can say, I'm not going to eat right now because I want to take care of my arteries. And another person can say, I'm not going to eat right now, even though I really feel like having a donut because it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even though my mother is driving me crazy, and even though my sister is teasing me, and even though whatever, for Allah. And so in that way, like this focusing the intention, when we can say, all this stuff I'm doing that's hard, all this stuff I'm doing that is new to me, especially for new Muslims, like it's new to not eat and drink all day. It's new to get your sleep all upside down and stay up until 11:30 praying, and then get up for suhoor, eating a full breakfast at 4:30 a.m. when usually you don't have anything but coffee until 10, or like all new stuff. So embracing that new and getting curious about how is this affecting me when I'm doing this for Allah? Like, how do I make sure that everything I'm doing is for Allah? I always think about that group, because to me, why am I doing something for myself? I'll just give myself whatever it wants then. No, I want to do it for Allah so that myself can be better and I can experience my belief and relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be deepened and can grow. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit, if you can maybe comment, just kind of, because I think what you just said was really connected to our first question, and the sort of the scope of the self in Islam, and maybe talk a little bit about the position of tarbiyah and tazkiyah as it is in relationship to the self and God. How is it that maybe it's a little confusing, I think, for Muslims, especially new Muslims, and I think we may have a lot of folks who are tuning in who are new Muslims, with this idea of how do I benefit myself and at the same time strive to please Allah in the context of tazkiyah and tarbiyah.
Well, so first of all, for me personally, the concept of tazkiyah and tarbiyah is really critical, is a critical part of our deen. That our religion, like we don't pray we pray to please Allah. Like Allah has given us things to do, like pray 5 times a day, like fast Ramadan. All of this is in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but ultimately all of these things are good for us. And they all walk us on the path of personal development. I guess the way I would answer that question is, I see these things as a scale. I see the hadith of Jibreel, angel Gabriel, when he came to the Prophet ﷺ in that super cool hadith where he comes in the shape of a man who's been traveling, without the signs of travel on him. And he speaks to the Prophet ﷺ in front of the companions. And they're so confused. Like, why is he asking him questions and saying correct and all of this stuff? And that he speaks first about Islam. So our walk in our development, in our tarbiyah. So tarbiyah means to be upbrought. It means to grow. Tazkiyah means to purify, to rid the self of what is ugly. I mean, what is not good, what is not pure, what is not pleasing to Allah. So he starts out, Angel Jibreel starts out asking the Prophet ﷺ about Islam. The Prophet ﷺ answers the 5 pillars of Islam. So on the path of tarbiyah and tazkiyah, we start here. We start with establishing our prayer, establishing our fast. And I don't think we should worry or stress about doing more than that until we've got our prayer established. I'm a person who wakes up for Fajr, period, end of story. I'm a person who knows how to pray and not feeling weird and uncomfortable about it. I mean, I remember when I first became Muslim, I didn't like to make wudu because it was I put my foot in the sink. And so in the very beginning, I didn't establish prayer because I didn't want to make wudu until finally I got to the point where, all right, I'm going to just make wudu. And then I established it. So now I knew I was going to pray. So once we fulfill that first level, then the next question Angel Gabriel asked the Prophet ﷺ was about Iman. Iman being, we should translate it as faith, but that's a deepening. That's when we start to go in. And that's, I say, we move to tazkiyah. So tarbiyah is going to train myself to pray and fast. Of course, there's other parts of tarbiyah as well, but just for the purpose of this question. And then in faith, we purify ourselves from all the things that are getting in the way of our belief, all the things that make our belief murky, that we don't have yaqeen, we don't have certainty. No, we work on getting to that certainty. And then as we move through there, and it takes many years to do that, we reach then the stage that he asked next, which was the stage of ihsan. The stage of ihsan is excellence. So we have an excellence in the earth. And that's where I want us to be as an ummah. I think that if we can as an ummah really follow these things, we will be in the right place. We'll be in the place where people are looking at us and saying, oh man, I wish I was born a Muslim. How do I join them? How do I become a Muslim? How can I be in that space of goodness, generosity, kindness, awesome closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So I think that's where I see the tazkiyah and the tarbiyah in moving us along on our path of faith.
So would you say if those
Thank you.
building blocks are not there, that should be the primary focus of ourself? Because what I see sometimes when I'm talking with people is those things are not established, right? The salah is not established, but they're trying to reach for the heights of spirituality still in, at least when I'm seeing this, sometimes you end up with kind of funny results of what spirituality looks like, when those building blocks are not there. So if somebody is struggling with those, would you say that would be their primary focus in Ramadan?
Yes, but I know that for some people they want to make it fun. So let me add a little spice and glitter to that.
Let's do it.
So I do, yeah. So the basic answer is yes. I think if you're struggling with prayer, like that's what I said in the beginning, know yourself. If you are a person who hasn't established prayer yet, you're struggling to get up for Fajr, you're struggling to pray at work, you're struggling to pray in front of your parents, whatever it is, make that, along with fasting, of course, the priority of Ramadan. But make it fun. Get yourself some stickers. I'm a sticker gal. Get yourself some stickers and make a little thing where every time you get your prayer on time, you give yourself a sticker, and then buy yourself something really fun to eat after you reach a certain space. Or if it's like for some people, there's a real hope to reconnect that first connection. For converts, that when you first become Muslim, there's an opening of the heart. And then it can feel like, wait, what happened to that? I want that back. And so there's this striving to, what can I do? What can I do to make that happen again? And sometimes people move into extremism, extreme doing, extreme things.
Zealousness, yeah. A period of zealousness, yeah.
In one thing, and they become unbalanced. And so I just want to comfort, first of all, if I can just say that it's normal to enter into Islam and feel that opening of the heart. And it's also normal to feel it close later because now you know what to work for. So don't panic about that. It's part of the process. It's part of the path. And know, with a capital K, that until the furud, the pillars, the prayer and the fasting are established, we're not going to reach those heights of spirituality that we're hoping for. Now, will we get a special gift from Allah? It's a gift? Yeah, sure. Because Allah is generous. So you might get a whiff here and a whiff there. But to really reach it, establish those basic things and make it fun by rewarding yourself, acknowledging that you're doing awesome. Don't get imposter syndrome. Acknowledge, instead of saying, but I missed a prayer last week, say, I haven't missed a prayer since last week. Like, think about it in a positive way. Recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman. Fulfill the duty to Allah and rely on His mercy. Do both of those together.
Perfect. I love that. We have one question that came in. How do you prioritize self-care when you have so many responsibilities and obligations towards others?
Yeah. Well, first of all, can we just take a minute and define self-care and recognize that the words by themselves mean taking care of the self, and the self that we have is both a temporal self, the self of this world, this moment, this hour, this day, when I'm feeling exhausted, or maybe I feel bitter, or maybe I feel all the feelings I feel. And the self is also the eternal self, the self that is hoping for great reward in the next life. And then there's also that in-between self, the self that is in the temporal world, but is mature, has matured and grown and developed. So when we're thinking about self-care, I want to start by saying, remember that it is a whole life, not a moment. And that our time we live in is in a time of great individuality and great individualism, and really telling us again and again, take care of yourself, take care of yourself, take care of yourself, you're tired, you're tired, you're tired, you're tired. People are walking all over you. People are your help. Why are you serving? Until we start to believe that we're never going to be able to take care of ourselves because we're taking care of others. But I would like to propose an alternative viewpoint paradigm, which is that in taking care of others, it's the ultimate care for ourselves. That when we're caring for those little children, when we're caring for a husband, we're caring for a wife, when we're caring for a parent, caring for a neighbor, caring for a student, caring for a colleague, going outside, stretching ourselves a little bit, we are caring for our long-term self. We're growing our future in this life, but we're also growing the next life. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that we don't recognize our boundaries. I do think that we should know that when we reach a certain place of tired, we're not serving anymore. We're just bitterly slapping things on the table. And so before we get to that point, we have to be honest. This isn't only self-care. This is honesty and saying, I'm tired. I need help. It's not shameful. I need help with this. And I need an hour, or I need a day, or I need half a day, or whatever it is that you need to replenish the feeling of to sleep, maybe just to sleep, or maybe to sit alone with your Quran, or maybe to go see a friend if you're a person who's really missing adult conversation. I know when we have little children at home, we can be like, can anyone say anything other than B is for bear right now? And so to find that adult conversation for that moment, that day or half a day is really important to recognize when we need it. And all of those things are good and a blessing. But I want to caution us against seeing the giving that we do as something outside of self-care. It's also caring for ourselves, subhanAllah. It really is. And there's nutrition in it and energy in it as well.
Yeah, and I think that goes into our last, the other question, right, Shannon, about how do we stay compassionate with ourselves as Muslims, right? You mentioned Buddhism earlier, and I think that there's a lot of talk about that over there, and so maybe not so much in Islam. However, it is a big, huge concept in our tradition as well. And so maybe how does that look? How does it look to sort of be easy on yourself and still be accountable at the same time?
Well, okay, so to be compassionate with the self and to hold yourself accountable, again, I have to go back. I'm really right now, this is the stage of my life where I'm really insisting that we have to know ourselves. Because and Imam al-Ghazali, of course, talks about this and talks about the importance of when we know ourselves, we can walk on this path. And the problem is if we don't know ourselves, we don't know what we need in that world of compassion. So what is compassion for the self for you, for example, might be very different than what it looks like for me because my needs are different than yours. So if we don't know what we need, we can be trying hard to fulfill what our society tells us, or even our Muslim community tells us is compassion for ourselves and never feeling fulfilled. So for example, I am a person who I really like people. I like to be around people. I like to talk to people. Alhamdulillah, like it's a blessing for me. I really enjoy it. So it is not compassion for me to myself to do Taraweeh at home every day, even though I actually also love to pray Taraweeh at home every day. I do enjoy that. So I have to find this space where which is compassion, which is good deeds, and where are these two joining? And I can only know that if I take time to figure out what is working for me. Now, of course, before I say that, before I walk that path for myself, I want to recognize that there is wisdom, always wisdom and compassion in the way of the Prophet ﷺ. So if something is a sunnah, then I'm going to look at that carefully before I decide I want to do something else for myself. So in the way of Taraweeh, for example, Taraweeh is a sunnah prayer. Now, I want to say, if you're still struggling with fasting, choose fasting first. Don't say, oh, I'm going to pray Taraweeh, but I can't fast and pray Taraweeh, so I'm not going to fast so I can have the energy to go to the mosque at night. No, fasting is the farad, so we start there. We do that fasting. And that's part of having compassion for the self. Choose what is important first. Fulfill what will please God first, and then do the next thing. So let's say we're not at that stage. We're fasting easily, and we want Taraweeh is something we want to do. Okay, so there's Taraweeh at the masjid in Jama'ah, in a group, and there's Taraweeh at home by yourself, and there's Taraweeh in a small group, maybe with a family or with some friends. Like, there are many ways to do Taraweeh prayers. Here is the beautiful place where you can say, what do I need spiritually? Am I teaching all day long and I really need some time alone? So maybe I am going to stay home and pray it alone. Maybe I do that day 1 and day 2, and day 3 I just fall asleep and I don't do it. Well, now maybe I need to change my sense of compassion for myself and say, I'm not going to do it if I'm sitting home. So I'm going to invite friends over because I really can't. Maybe a person is feeling they can't drive to the masjid or it's too much for them. Or is it the opposite? Do they start out saying, no, I'm going to go to the masjid, I'm going to be with people, I'm going to be with Muslims, I'm going to have that strength. And then a day comes when they can't do it. Now what do they do at home? So I feel like I'm answering this in a very complicated way, and I apologize because compassion shouldn't be complicated. But maybe I'm getting old. I feel like it's dangerous to have a pat answer for what is compassion. Like when we say, be kind to yourself, sister, don't ABC, we can be stopping her from exactly what she needs, but it's what you don't need. Like the person who's giving that advice, literally that's what they just can't handle. So right. I just really think it's important to sit in that space of understanding the self and taking advantage of this thing called sunnah, because there's khair in it. But we can do it in many different ways, not just Taraweeh, but that's an example.
Yeah, I think I listened to a lecture that you gave regarding Qiyam al-Layl. And you were talking about the difference between the furud and the nawafil. And I think that when I have this question about self-compassion in my mind, the reason why I think that it's so important for Muslims specifically is because we tend to be very hard on ourselves spiritually, and excessively so. That zealousness that you brought up earlier, I think a lot of us take that and we really never know how to tone that down. And we sort of catastrophize in our mind that how can I ever possibly be a good Muslim because I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. And the truth is that for me, the secret of self-compassion is knowing my own limits and knowing that what draws me near to Allah and becoming beloved to Him as I want to be. It first begins with that first level, the furud, the arkan al-Islam, and just establishing that, and anything beyond that is within my capacity is just extra and drawing me near. But if I don't do those things, if I don't pray the rawatib, or I don't pray the sunan siyam, for example, I'm not a bad Muslim.
Right. No.
And that's compassion. And it's not just truth, it's compassion to the self and saying, I know that I'm still on the path as long as I'm establishing the furud, and I don't have to be like we have this word in America, super sheikh, right? But I do think that we fall victim a lot of sort of comparing ourselves to other people and holding ourselves to such a high level that we ultimately leads many people out of Islam. And I think all of us have experienced people who have left Islam feeling that I can never be good enough. And so why even try?
Yeah, let's see.
And I think it's about like giving credit where credit's due, of that piece of having compassion for yourself, of, these are areas where I have room for growth, but these are areas where I'm showing up in things that might be hard for me, or things where I have grown in a big way. I know when I first came to Islam, like, people said, it's Ramadan, so you worship more. And I'm like, what does that look like? And there's certain things where I just really needed it spelled out for me.
Mhm.
And I found this one like checklist online, and some people are into checklists, some people aren't. What it felt like to me was this menu. And I could choose, okay, these are the things that are accessible to me. In those early years, doing a khitma, that was not accessible.
Right.
Even in English, I was working full time, I was a student full time, I was a single mom. Like, that just was not, that was going to be an area where, if I'm going to hold myself accountable to that, then I'm going to feel guilty at the end of the month. I didn't do this and I didn't do that. But there are other things on that menu that I can do these things, and they're a step up
Mhm.
from where I am. And I think it's always looking at that of, okay, here's where I am. Maybe I've even fallen back from last year or where I was 5 years ago, but what is the next step? And if we keep focusing on just like those small steps, that's where, we can hold ourselves accountable, and we can have that compassion of like, pat yourself on the back. Alhamdulillah, I did this.
Yeah.
I added the sunnah prayers into my day, and inshallah, that's going to continue for the next year.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
All right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please finish
No,
your sentence. I thought
well,
you.
and just, like you guys were saying, of sometimes we look at the rest of the Muslim community and we see how they're showing up, of how they're doing more in Ramadan. And it might not feel like those things are accessible to us. It might be more quiet at home things that are accessible to us. And that's no less valid, of taking that step forward.
And I just that it's no less valid. Like, that's such an important sentence, because Ramadan. I was just talking about how Ramadan, when you enter it, you enter it. Like, you're in it, no matter what. It's, you can be putting in lots of the checklists. You can have all the things, but you could just be fasting only. Or what about the person who can't fast? She's not even fasting, but she's in Ramadan. She's benefiting from Ramadan just by being here, just by living in this time and being a believer. Like, literally, that's it right there. We're benefiting, and there's depth, and
Wow.
there's growth, and
Yeah.
there's there's real beauty and like glitter mercy that comes down to us in this beautiful month.
True.
I love it. Can you expand? I've heard your glitter analogy before. Can you expand on that?
Yes. So um so when we so this it comes from the Fatiha. We say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah. One of the Mufassirin, actually it's Fidil al-Quran, he says, when the believer hears Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, so overwhelmed by the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful, ar-Rahman and ar-Rahim, that the response is Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, oh, Alhamdulillah. So when I first read that, I got this image, that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere. It's so everywhere. And as a mom, we used to do glitter projects at home. So if you do a glitter project at home, you're done for. Like, that's it. You can put it on the table and put newspaper, and you can put newspaper under them and do everything, but it is all over you, and it's all over your carpet, and it's in your kids' hair, and it's literally at your in-laws' house, even though they live on the other side of town. And that's what it is. That's the analogy, that Allah's mercy is like glitter. You can't get away from it. Like, you can try. You can be like, oh, I didn't deserve it. Sorry, it's all over you. It's like the glitter of Allah's mercy is everywhere. And we want it, you don't want it, it's there. So just embrace it and just have that glitter and say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
I love it. So we have another question that came in. It said, how can I be self-confident in my deeds in the face of Allah? I always feel extremely low when I think that I am not worthy as a Muslim.
You're worthy. That's not up to you. That's up to you. You have a soul and you have a body, and Allah created you. It's not about, that's a trick of shaitan. And you can even have a trick of shaitan in Ramadan, by the way. When I became Muslim, my Malaysian roommates, God bless them, they said, listen, it was my first Ramadan. They said, listen, even though shaitan isn't going to be here, you're not going to be suddenly perfect. And I said, why not? They said, because we're all very good students of shaitan. This young 20-year-old full of wisdom, mashallah. And so when you feel like you're not worthy as a Muslim, say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and no, that is not up to you or me or anyone. You are worthy. Do you say, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this beautiful self. Allah, I heard somebody say the other day, she's driving along the highway and seeing the beautiful savannas and overwhelmed by how beautiful they are. So think right now, and everyone who's listening, to think of a beautiful scene that you see, mountains or an ocean, something that you see that you love. For me, it's the autumn. I love it so much. I get overwhelmed by those leaves. I look at them, I just can't. Or cherry blossoms, for example. What do you see that just overwhelms you with beauty? The one who created that created you. And the one who created that beauty and created you chose you to receive irada, to be able to be this one who can choose to worship him. So never allow yourself to say, I'm not worthy. You're worthy. Khalas, just move forward. Alhamdulillah. Yani you say, I mean, Allah made the cherry blossoms and Allah made me. Whatever it is that you are excited about.
Yeah, this also is connected to another question that came up about anxiousness and being. So the question says, I always feel like I have this anxiousness in my heart and my mind and feel overwhelmed with various thoughts, especially during prayer. How do I combat that restlessness in my heart and quiet my mind?
Okay, so I'm a very pragmatic, practical person. So pardon me if I start out my answer with very practical things and not sort of the candles and all of that. First of all, do your best to pray your prayer in the first 15 to 20 minutes of that prayer. I know it can't always be but when you can, do your best. So that's one thing that's going to help, to start praying that prayer in the early time, not leaving it to the very end. Second, when you stand to pray, before you say Allahu Akbar, this is just a practical tip. We know that Allahu Akbar, like we learn in class about prayer, that when we say Allahu Akbar, we're saying God is greater than all things and moving into the prayer, right? So before you do that in Arabic, just before you put your hands up, take a minute and look where you're standing and realize you're standing in a place that is facing the same direction as every other Muslim on the earth who happens to be praying at that time, and they'd be praying other prayers at that time, all around the world, all directed at the same direction. Your help, I always like to think of us being helped by the prayers of everyone, like we are one ummah together. So we're like helping one another. And then remember that it's true. Allahu Akbar is true. So that when we say it, think about yourself moving from one room and one metaphorical room to the next. So you say, Allahu Akbar, I'm no longer in this space. Now I'm in the space between me and Allah, and all my worries, all of my thoughts, when they come, I'm just going to say, you're not welcome right now. Please leave. Just go right out. Don't stress about them. Let them go. And think about the Quran that you're saying. Now, I know when you don't speak Arabic, that's really tough. So I learn the meanings of some of those short surahs, the word meaning. So when you say, Qul huwallahu ahad, you know that ahad, what does that mean? It means, unique or one, or so learn what those words are. So when you're saying them, you can think about them, or just think Allahu Akbar while you're reciting your Quran. Inshallah, it's really helpful. And I don't like to think of it as a fight. I like to think of it as a visit. Like it's something lovely. It's something there, and it's a lovely thing that you're standing on this prayer carpet in this space, this beautiful space where you are standing before the creator of the world. Also, have special prayer clothes. They talk about practical. Have something that smells good. That's like prayer clothes. Of course, for women, I always recommend this, but even for men, what is the thing you put on when you pray? What is the carpet you stand on when you pray? What is that? So it's like, have something that's unique so that it changes the environment itself, the smell itself, brings you out of wherever your brain is right now and brings you to that space.
I like
Yeah,
that.
and I would add too, just to say that I don't think many Muslims, and maybe you could just really briefly, because this is a huge topic, I know, and maybe you avoided this for a reason, but I think most Muslims don't understand sort of the stages of consciousness in Islam, and from the khawatir and the hawajis and the hadith al-nafs and the waswasa and the azm and the like. I mean, there's a whole process that's happening, right? And we're constantly having thoughts coming and going. Some that have some resonance, and some that just are just gone right away as they come. And this is completely normal. And I think that a lot of Muslims just think it's all waswasa, and that's not the case. We have a whole thing that our ulama have taught us about. And so maybe just comment on how Muslims can maybe kind of understand that and capture, like you said, it's not necessarily always from shaitan, it's just a thought, and we
Yeah, I mean, certainly so. I guess, like you said, this is a very vast topic and a lot of vocabulary people aren't always used to. So I think that what I would say about that is that the human being in its own thoughts, even in the encouragement of the angels, in the nafs itself, and the different types of nafs, that is inside, and all of that, all of these things are growing and changing throughout our lives. And there are amazing, beautiful books and things we can study to help us on that path. But in those beginning stages when you're feeling worried about your prayer, also just don't, perfection is the enemy of good. So if you're trying to make it perfect, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's a prayer. It's a prayer to Allah, the one who is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Al-Wudud. So stand and be there, be present at the best that you can. And next time you're going to be a little bit more present, inshallah.
And I think too, sometimes that permeates throughout our lives. We study upon study upon study shows like our attention span is minuscule compared to what it used to be. And so we find ourselves, okay, I'm going to read a book. 2 pages in, we're like, I should go wash the dishes. 3 dishes in, I should
Right.
go. So I think we also need to recognize, is this just the prayer, or is this kind of a whole life thing for me that I need to work on?
Yeah.
There's one book that I would highly suggest. It's not a Muslim author or anything, but just it's Cal Newport, I believe. But it's his book Deep Work. And he's talking about how we are always pulling for these small, easy things and changing topics and, checking email, then checking WhatsApp and whatever. And I think if we can align that piece of ourselves throughout our lives, that's going to show up in our prayer too.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Yes, absolutely. That's such a good point. I mean, because if we're judging our prayer and judging it as falling short, but it looks like the rest of our life, it's just, why is it falling short then? It's just the rest. That's just how we're showing up everywhere.
Exactly.
So yeah, very, very good point. Excellent point. No, subhanAllah.
Very
How
nice.
are we doing on time?
Can you say that again? I missed it.
I was asking you how are we doing on time there, Shannon?
Brother Daniel says we have 15 minutes. He's the man behind the curtain. He's like the Wizard of Oz.
He is, yeah.
That's so cool.
MashaAllah. So if anybody has any other questions, we just have about 15 minutes left. Ansa, is there anything else that, you came into this and you're like, if there's anything that I want people to know about this is it? Was there something that you had in mind?
Well, because this is Embrace, I'm thinking about that convert experience. And as I had a convert experience, I think about the foreignness of Ramadan. And I guess what I would like to say is that in Ramadan, if you're a new Muslim, or even if you're a, getting older a little bit, maybe a toddler Muslim, 5, 6, 7 years, Ramadan it's a foreign thing. So it's okay. Like, it's okay to recognize that this is new. This is foreign. I don't mean foreign in another country, foreign to you, foreign to your experience. There's so much of it that is new. I've been Muslim for 37, 38 years. And my mother, I think this is the first Ramadan she didn't ask me, not even water. And part of the reason is because she doesn't live next door to me right now. She's a snowbird, so she's down south. God bless her. And it's not disrespect. It's just such a foreign concept. Not even coffee, not even water. Really? And understanding what that is. And so instead of standing in the place of feeling like a foreigner to your own self, I want to recommend that in Ramadan, not just Eid, in Ramadan, you start building, you as in we, as in all of us, start building or build nostalgic corners of our hearts and heads. What do I mean by that? In our childhood, all of us in our childhood have nostalgic corners. Those are the smells that when you smell them, you say, you have a memory, you have a feeling. You might not even know exactly what that is, but there's a feeling that comes in. We are missing many of those as Muslims when we go into Ramadan, because we don't have childhood memories in Ramadan. We don't have childhood memories in Eid. We don't have those smells of the food that our mother cooked, or that thing that our father did every first day of Ramadan. We have nothing. It's blankness. And often when we are mixing in a culture, whatever it is, whatever the majority culture is at the mosque that you might go to, that culture doesn't have self-awareness of what their traditions are. And very often, if that culture has come over to the United States, even those original culture things have dissipated and kind of disappeared. So they're hiding out at home a little bit, but they're not really there. So my recommendation is make your own. Bring forward things you like. So I love cinnamon rolls. I like the smell of cinnamon, and I hate waking people up. So what I always did is I made homemade cinnamon rolls every year for the first night of Ramadan. Every single year I would make them, and I'd put them in the oven, and all the kids would wake up because it smelled at 3:00 in the morning. The whole house smells like cinnamon rolls, cinnamons, and they were like walking like that bird in the commercial, my nose, following my nose thing. And it was awesome. And my daughter is now 32 or something like that. She's in her early 30s. 30. And this Ramadan, she made cinnamon rolls that were sugar-free for me, because I'm trying to avoid sugar. And she's like, we got to do tradition, Mom. We got to do tradition. We got to do tradition. And I was like, wow, I gave her nostalgia. Thank you, Mom. But I gave her something that she thinks now is a part, Ramadan for her is smelling cinnamon rolls in the beginning of the month. And that might seem really silly. Why do we care about cinnamon rolls? No, it matters. We have to have the corners of nostalgia, whatever it is. It can be literally anything. It can be one thing I do every year. I didn't do it this year, but every other year I used to always buy all of the girls of the family new prayer clothes to pray in. I didn't do it this year because I had new ones from a couple months ago. But it's like a thing. I come to Ramadan and we're all expecting. And one year I didn't do it. My daughter was like, well, Mama, where's the new prayer clothes? So that's also a thing. What are you doing to build nostalgia for your Ramadan? Because it is yours. It belongs to you, and you don't have background. So recognize that and build it in foods, in smells, in social gatherings. What were the things about Christmas, if you were a Christian before, that mattered to you? Don't be afraid to sit down and unpack that. What was it? Was it getting together with family? Was it gifts? Was it knowing what you're eating every year? Was it what was it that really mattered to you? And maybe there were some stressful things. Every family has the stressful things. Leave those out. Don't bring those forward. Find the things that are positive and bring them forward. I care a lot about, I think food is really, I like food and I think it's fun. So I used to try every year to do something new with food. One year we did we did it every year, every day of Eid, a different country's food. So we had Malaysian food. We had, I can't remember what other countries did at the time, but make it fun. And and try to make it something not only for the kids. I want to underline that, because especially for women, and I suppose also for men, it's really, you're in this place where you're worried about those kids. And if you neglect yourself here in your own memories, you may find them having left the house and you don't have anything to do for yourself. So even if you're doing your own Ramadan calendar, I at 56 years old, after 37 years of Ramadan, something like that, I have every year a Ramadan daftar, notebook. I have my Ramadan planner, my Ramadan stuff that I write, my stickers, my all that stuff. And it's part of my bringing my whole self to Ramadan. Now, part of that also in Ramadan is that when is deciding who those relationships are that you're going to spend time with. So again, for converts in Ramadan, where's the family? Like, the family's not there. Their parents aren't there. Their sisters aren't there. They're not calling them and saying, Happy Ramadan. Like this year, my father's wife sent me a message, Happy Ramadan. And I was like, wow, mashallah. That's pretty nice, but we're not getting that same thing that the Muslims are. Like, their whole phone is flooded with, the born Muslims they're flooded with messages, Happy Ramadan, everyone's calling them and everything else. And we're just like, yeah. So be the one who calls. You be the one who calls. Get yourself a list of 15 converts and call them up. Call them up and tell them, Happy Ramadan, Happy Ramadan, Happy Ramadan, with nothing else to say and no other agenda. And if they don't pick up because nobody answers the phone now, send them a voice message, or and then next a regular message. But like, give them a call. Hey, how are you doing? What are you planning to do this month? And choose a day to bring people over. Don't wait to be invited for iftar. Invite for iftar. Find places that are serving iftar and go and make those. Now, what is this for? To create corners of nostalgia. So this is what I do. So you say to yourself 10 years from now, well, this is like when you're invited to a panel and you say, well, what I do in Ramadan is, and you know what it is because you've created the corners of nostalgia. You have to be proactive about this. This is not going to be natural. It's not, and it doesn't. I really want to recommend, if you are married into a culture, that you go ahead and borrow from those, but choose some that represent your own culture, because when you get older, you're not going to feel as connected to the things you've borrowed from another culture. So one thing for Eid, I always did for my kids is we did the gifts appearing, so like how gifts appear with Santa Claus. Of course, Santa Claus is a big lie, the big conspiracy lie. But I would go shopping with them, and then I wouldn't let them see their Eid clothes. And they'd wake up in the morning, everyone had their corner with their Eid clothes out and a little gift. And as they grew older, they started buying stuff to put in the piles. So, but it remained a nostalgia thing, that it wasn't only about the kids. And that's really important. I'm not saying don't do things for the kids. Of course, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying remember yourself in the midst of that. Remember yourself to create those corners of nostalgia for yourself.
Yeah. And I just want to underline, you said this, but that it's not going to come natural. It took years for me to start feeling like this was my holiday and not just like a Tuesday where I'm not working or we're going to go eat somewhere. And then also another thing that I guess I've always been a mom. Well, when I came to Islam, my daughter was 7. So it's like you hit the ground running, and it does become about your kids if you're not really careful. And then when their Islam is kind of ebbing and flowing, you're on this tidal wave. So if you connect your Islam to your husband, to your kids, or whatever, if it's not connected individually, you're in for a big ride, and you're not always going to like where that's taking you. I do have one last, we just have 5 minutes. So maybe like 2 minutes, and then we'll end with a dua. We have one question. What is your advice on dealing with loneliness during Ramadan? That's a big question to end with, just a couple minutes. Sorry.
No, I mean, loneliness is a thing that is, it comes at different life stages for different reasons. So I think a quick answer to this is recognize what kind of loneliness you're dealing with. Is it a loneliness of faith, where the people around you that you love are not at the level of faith you are? Find some friends that you can share your Ramadan with in another way as well. There's another kind of loneliness that is a craving for God that we don't really recognize. We feel like we're lonely, but actually what we really need is just to spend some time in dua. So if that's what it is, then spend some time talking to Allah. And then there's another kind of loneliness that is the FOMO loneliness of everyone has a family and I don't have a family. And it's okay. Every year we have seasons of life. So don't talk yourself out of happiness by saying I'm not happy because I don't have what other people have. Be happy with where you are right now. Enjoy that as much as you can, because a day will come when you might say to yourself, oh, I just need 5 minutes alone. But you got 5 kids and a husband and in-laws and sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law and a couple of cats and chickens and who knows what else. So
Yes, I love that. I love that. Brother Musa, do you want to close us out with a dua?
Sure. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم تقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا وتلاوتنا وتجعلنا من أهل الجنة وتحفظنا من النار. اللهم نسألك أن تجعلنا من الذين يدخلون الجنة بباب ريان. اللهم اغفر لنا وللمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات أحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. آمين يا رب العالمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله خير يا شيخنا doctor. It's good to meet
thank you.
Yeah.
Such a fun thing. Thank you so much. May everyone's Ramadan be awesome.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
السلام عليكم.